You're listening to Real Talk Texas with local expert Steve Hakes. Now, here's Steve.
Welcome back. You're listening to Real Talk Texas, where we have real experts giving real advice for our listeners. And today we have Lori Ashmore Peters in our studio to give real advice about protecting your assets. Before the break, I promised that we were going to give away a free gift to the first 20 listeners. So you want to get your pen and paper. Actually, you really don't need to do that. All you need to do is just remember this. Go to realtalktexas.com. Send me a note. There's a little area where you hit contact. Just send me a quick note and say, send me that book. Lori is going to give away to the first 20 people that send me that email or that contact. We're going to give away a book called Do I Really Need a Will? So please make sure you tell me where to send it when you do that. Lori's been kind enough to give away her book here. Now, before I throw that out there, Do I Really Need a Will? Lori, what's the book tell me?
It's a very easy read. It's not a bunch of legal language in there, and it just talks about why you need a will. Different types of wills, because there are different types of wills. It talks about how to determine what your estate consists of. It talks about what types of assets are distributed under your will. It talks about the foundation of your estate planning, which is your will, and then your power of attorney for your finances, your power of attorney for health care, your directive to physicians that talks about whether or not you want to be hooked up to life support.
Is that your living will?
That is your living will,
Okay.
as well as you're able to designate who you want your guardian to be, and more importantly, who you do not want it to be if you're ever in that situation. So it really talks about the foundation of your estate plan.
So don't forget, when you get home, or if you're driving around right now, make sure that you go online to realtalktexas.com, send me a note, say, just in the title of it, just say, send me that book. And Lori's been so generous to provide that for our listeners out there today. So now we're going to move on to the second area of protecting your assets. And so first we talked about wills. We talked about probate, what that was. Now we're going to get into trust. Now, I've always heard the word trust and things like that. I'm not sure if our listeners or if I really understand why I would need a trust or what that actually is. So, what's a trust?
Well, that's an interesting question. There are many, many, many types of trusts out there. A lot of times I have a client that comes into me that says, I need to put all of my assets in a trust. I need to avoid probate at all cost. Like I had said previously, in the state of Texas, probate it's a rather easy process. It is a process that can be completed in about 30 to 45 days. So not everybody needs a trust. You do have the different types of trusts. We'll start with what we call a testamentary trust, which is a trust that you put in your will. If you have minor children and you eventually want to leave them part of your estate, we would put in your will what we call a minor's trust, because if they're under the age of 18, they cannot own property. You do not want them to own property. If you have life insurance policies out there or annuities, 401ks, retirement plans, and you can designate a beneficiary, you do not want to designate your minor children as the beneficiaries of those policies. So if that's the case, we would prepare certain types of trusts that we can put within your will.
Well, that sounds interesting. I mean, you think about it, just looking back 10 years ago in my own life when my kids were younger, and my wife and I, we didn't have a will. Mm-hmm. And maybe it was 15 years ago, and time flies. But anyway, we didn't have a will, and we were going on a company trip, and we were going out of the country. We're both going to be on the same plane, and I said, we got to make sure our kids are taken care of. We live in Texas. Everybody else lives in Ohio. Mm-hmm. What would happen if the plane went down? So it was one of those things where we said, okay, what happens? We had life insurance and all those things, but, after meeting you and really thinking this through, what do you do? I mean, what's the best thing to do? So we ran out and got a will, mm-hmm. and basically said that our friends in Ohio were going to be the trustee. We were also told never have your family member running the money. So I had a friend that was running the money side, and my family was working on coming down to Texas, getting the kids,
right,
taking custody of the kids and things like that at that time. So
sure.
I thought it was really important. But when you're talking about the money, I never even thought about that. You shouldn't give it directly to the kids when they're minors.
You can't, because what happens is if you've got a kid that's under the age of 18 and they're a minor, if they are left any insurance policies or any kind of property whatsoever without it being in a trust, you have to go through the court process to where a guardian is appointed. And if you haven't been responsible enough to have your will in place where you're telling everybody who you want that guardian to be, it's the judge that determines who that guardian is. And it's not always going to be who you would have picked.
Yeah.
Whereas if you put it into a trust, it's a trustee, it's someone that you picked, the trustee has control over everything. If it's not a trust, the judge controls what money can be spent for your kids and what money can't be spent. So it's always wise, if you've got minor children, to make sure that you have the proper trusts out there. Other types of trusts are what we call revocable trusts or irrevocable trusts. There are many reasons why you want a trust. It's not just for the rich. It's not just for the wealthy. For management purposes, for ease of management of your assets, then you can put your assets into what we call a revocable trust. It can be amended, it can be terminated, it can be revoked, it can be modified by you at any time. It uses your Social Security number. So for tax purposes, it's running under your Social Security number.
Well, a lot of times as a mortgage professional, we'll do loans on homes that are actually not done in their individual names. They're done in the family trust names.
Correct, and also for privacy. For privacy reasons. If, when you die, your assets are put in a document that we call an inventory, and that is filed at the clerk's office, and it's public record. And anyone can go there and pull your case, your file at the clerk's office, and they can see everything you had when you died. And frankly, for a lot of people, it's no one's business. So we create these revocable trusts. You can live out of it, you can write checks, you can do whatever you want. It's an extension of you, but you retitle your assets into that revocable trust. The other type of trust is what we call irrevocable. It cannot be modified, revoked, amended, terminated by you. It can only be revoked or modified, terminated by a court. You actually have to go to court and show the judge why you're wanting to make changes to this trust. But it's irrevocable. It's used for asset protection, and it's used for tax planning. If you set it up the right way, the IRS can't look at it when they're determining what your worth is when you die to determine whether or not you have estate tax issues. And that's the irrevocable trust.
So there's some little secrets there that are you're giving us that possibly we could have a tax shelter by having a trust set up and things like that. And with everything that's has happened this last week, we may be looking for as many shelters as we can because we may be facing a very high taxation. And we have the fiscal cliff coming up.
Absolutely. We have no idea. We know that January 1 of 2013, the estate tax exemption goes down to $1 million at a 55% tax rate.
55%. So I've already paid tax on it when I earned it. Now when I give it to my kids, it goes to 55%.
Anything over that $1 million goes to 55%.
Wow.
Do we expect it to stay that way? No, but who knows? We're not sure what's going to happen right now. Other types of trusts is you can have a trust that holds your life insurance policy. And again, the reason for that is if you have a $1 million, $2 million, $3 million life insurance policy, you can put it in a special type of trust called an irrevocable life insurance trust. And again, if it's set up properly, the IRS doesn't look to it when they're determining what your worth is for estate tax purposes. You've got charitable trusts. You've got grantor retained annuity trusts. There are a lot of different trusts out there.
Well, if you've just joined us, you're listening to Real Talk Texas, and we've obviously got a real expert in our studio today. We've got Lori Ashmore Peters of Ashmore Law Firm here in Dallas. She is giving us great advice, or at least great insight as to what's available to you out there to protect your assets. One of the things I wanted to ask also is, I know you said it's not always for rich people, but let's say I'm a middle American person. Mm-hmm. Why would I need a trust?
Whenever I meet with a potential client, the first thing they need to do is come in and give me a listing of all of their assets. And with that, we determine what types of trusts they need. If they need a trust that is just for ease of management of their assets, then we create what we call that revocable living trust. If they have a son or a daughter that's a spendthrift, whether you give that child $5,000 or $50,000 or $500,000, it's going to be gone in a matter of weeks. We can create what we call a spendthrift trust. And what that trust does is it makes sure that that money is there for that child for whatever duration you choose, and they get a little at a time. The trustee has the sole discretion to make these distributions.
Sounds like my wife needs to set that up for me.
There you go. There you go. But it's to make sure that the money's going to be there for your loved one and that they're not just going to spend it. Trusts are also a type of prenup. You know, a lot of times people don't want to have to talk to their fiance about signing a prenup, whereas, you know, if my father has a trust, I'm the beneficiary of that trust. It's my trust. It's my separate property. My husband can't get to it. If I die, my husband, as long as he remains single and takes care of the kids, he gets some protection from the trust. But if he cohabitates or if he remarries, my father doesn't want to pay for his new wife, so the trust then goes to my kids.
And I want to have one in there for me if my wife marries somebody better looking than me after I pass away.
We can do that.
I want to take it all away.
We can do that.
That's just a party foul on that one. So anyway, so we're having a good time in the studio today. We've got Lori Ashmore Peters of the Ashmore Law Firm here in Dallas, and she's giving us great advice here on Real Talk Texas. So stay tuned. Don't forget to go to our website, realtalktexas.com. Send me that email and ask me for that free book. And so we're going to come back afterward, and we're going to talk about business structures, LLCs, family limited partnerships, things like that. A little more tricks of the trade to help you in how to shelter you and protect your assets. So stay tuned.